So, hello, Confluence Faith Community. I'm here with Dr. Chelsea, who is one of my closest friends and is a scholar on the devil. So, as following up from Sunday, we're just going to have a conversation and you guys get to listen in. But I hope it's fun and exciting for you. So, Chelsea, I want to start off by first of all asking a basic question. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Education.
I am Dr. Chelsea Trotter. I have been working in the theological realm for a really long time. I got a bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University in Ancient Near Eastern Studies, and then also at the same institution in classics with an emphasis in early Christian literature. And then I did my PhD at St. Louis University, where I specialized in early Christianity and more particularly in perceptions and functions of the devil in Christian circles.
Yeah, and you did your dissertation was on 3rd and 4th century understandings of the devil, or?
I zeroed in on that. The dissertation itself kind of covers understandings of the devil from basically the earliest records we have of Judaism up through the New Testament and then into 3rd and 4th century.
Yeah, fun. So the big difficult question: who or what is the devil? In the simplest phrase that you can put it.
So I love how you ask extraordinarily complicated question as though, and then say, now do it simply.
Right.
So really the answer to that question depends on when we're talking about. If we look at early depictions in the devil in the Old Testament, or what non-Christians would call the Hebrew Bible, we're actually seeing, whenever it refers to Satan, there's two types of Satan. One is like just a regular noun, that usually means like an adversary, or in some cases like a legal prosecutor. But then what we later come to see as the devil comes from the two words ha-shatan, which basically means the Satan. And that seems to be more of like a heavenly title. And if you actually look at where this title is used, it at this point doesn't look like the Satan is actually an enemy of God, but actually rather part of God's heavenly court, whose job is to prosecute people. So in the Old Testament, Satan seems to be working for God and at God's behest, not as enemies. But then if you jump forward several hundred years, we start to get an image of Satan not as God's servant, but as God's enemy. And then you jump forward about 100 more years from that, and you start to get this idea that, well, Satan was originally one of God's angels, but then did something wrong, and depending on which circle you're looking at, sometimes it's pride, sometimes it's greed, sometimes it's envy, but does something to get kicked out of heaven and become a fallen angel. And this is kind of the understanding that we see that gets picked up in the New Testament. We see a version of that people could interpret that. The New Testament doesn't actually have a lot of detail about the devil, but it is around this time that we start referring to the devil instead of Satan. We call him, it, whatever you want to say, as the devil. And that's just because we're switching from Hebrew to Greek. And at this time, it's actually pretty vague. We do see that there's a general Christian understanding of a devil being there in the New Testament, and seems to have something to do with tempting. But there's not a lot of detail beyond that. But you do get the idea that the devil is seen as God's enemy. And it's not until 200-300 years after that that early Christian fathers actually tried to fill in the vagueness in the New Testament. And so this is where, about the 2nd century, you start to see the idea that the devil was actually the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Before that, the serpent was just the serpent.
Yeah.
wasn't associated with the devil.
Okay.
You see, and then you see more added to it. And where my research really came in is, and this is why your question is so complicated, if you look at the individual portrayals of the devil beginning in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, you'll see that early Christians actually couldn't agree on who the devil was. Instead, each Christian community starts to make up what they think the devil is. And sometimes those look very different from each other.
Yeah. I find that completely interesting because there's such an emphasis, or at least an understanding within Christianity, that there's like one train of thought, there's one way of being or thought process. But what I'm hearing you even suggest is it was part of the Christian community, but that language about the devil really was more sparse.
There was definitely a shared terminology, but what exactly the term devil meant.
Okay.
And partially to understand this, you have to understand that you have the Christian church in the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
But almost immediately after the New Testament, some scholars might argue during the time the New Testament is being written, you don't have one cohesive Christianity, like that there's one Christian church. Nobody actually attempts to do this till the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century.
Right.
So before that, what you actually kind of have is a bunch of competing Christianities that they all believe some of the same general principles, usually that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, who sacrificed himself for the sins. I mean, there were some outliers that maybe interpreted it differently, but there was commonalities in that way so that they all called themselves Christians.
Okay.
But if you looked at it, there was also a lot of differences, and they were all kind of competing with one another, and it's not till the Council of Nicaea that one actually comes out on top. And so while you have these different Christian churches kind of competing, you see that each competing church also has a little bit of a different idea of what the devil is.
Yeah. Would you, just thinking in modern terms, would you liken the divisions similar to the multiplicity of different traditions that we have within the overarching Christianity?
Yeah, absolutely. You basically, with the exception that it tended to be more geographically based, just because communication was much difficult, so usually one church would be in one specific location.
Yeah.
Just because you don't have the internet or easy communication to keep things all on the same page.
Yeah. Something you said a little bit ago also intrigued me, that you were talking about Satan or the devil and the Hebrew understanding from the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, versus New Testament understanding really wasn't developed. Was part of that a shift in linguistics between Hebrew for the Hebrew Bible and Greek for the New Testament?
It is not so much a shift in linguistics as much as maybe trying to think about things a little bit differently, right? And one of the things that we're thinking about differently is kind of, we struggle as a people with the idea that evil can exist, and if God creates everything, then if he creates evil, doesn't that make God a little bad? So we have to negotiate. And at first, we hadn't really hit that problem yet. And so we tried to explain evil existing as, well, evil wasn't really evil. It's just the Satan trying to test us, right? And like you see this, the most clear example is like Job, right?
Yeah.
You have God and Satan talking about Job, and Satan's like, well, it's time to test this guy. And he, some would say he pressures God into doing it or something like that, but the whole point is to test Job. And that Satan doesn't actually do anything without God's permission first. But as time goes along, people start to not be satisfied with that explanation anymore. Because if you look back at the law of Moses and the covenants that are made, God very specifically says, you know, if you keep my commandments, do what you're supposed to do, I will prosper you. And if you don't, you're not going to prosper.
Yeah.
People start to say, well, how come bad things still happen to good people?
Mm.
How come these people are keeping the covenants, but they're not prospering?
Yeah.
And at first we're like, well, that's Satan testing them. But then sometimes people start asking, like, well, some of these tests are pretty messed up.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, especially if it's something really grievous, like the death of a loved one or something like that.
Yeah.
People start to wonder, well, is it possible that even these tests may be verging into the realm of evil?
Yeah.
And so there's a period in between the end of the Hebrew Bible and the beginning of the New Testament that we call the pseudepigraphy. These are religious writings that were accepted to some degree at the time they were written, but they never made the cut into the Bible.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's in these pseudepigraphal writings that we first start to see a devil figure, whether it's Satan or Beelzebub or something like that,
Yeah.
start to be portrayed as an enemy to God, because we're trying to answer the question, how can good things happen to bad people without God causing it?
Mm.
Right? Without God breaking the covenant that if we're doing what we're supposed to do, we're going to prosper.
Yeah.
And so this is where we start to see people try to answer that question with the devil. And let me clarify really quick. My research doesn't really get into whether or not the theology of this all makes sense. I look at specifically the functions of the devil.
Yeah.
And so these functions can be interpreted both within the lens of faith and outside of it.
Yeah.
And so as I'm talking and I say things like people needed to explain this, I'm not saying that these were uninspired or anything like that. What I'm saying,
Right.
if you look at the function changes from the devil seeming to function as a servant of God to the devil now being some sort of fallen angel.
Yeah.
But so this helps the situation, though, in that if the devil is created good, then God didn't create evil. Then the devil chooses bad on his own and falls.
Mm.
Evil can now come from the devil without God having created it.
Yeah.
And so whether or not that idea is inspired or not is kind of something that every person of faith has to judge on their own.
Right.
But as far as the function is concerned, it's now trying to help us address that question of how can evil exist without God creating it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's in this pseudepigrapha group of writings that we start to see that, and this idea becomes very popular and seems to be at least common at the time the New Testament's being written. And
Yeah.
then by the time we hit the second, third, and fourth century, it has become part of Christianity.
Mm. Yeah. Well, when you say that it has become a part of Christianity, were there any specific movements that really, or writings, authors that really helped solidify some of that shift?
It's hard to tell, like at the time, but looking back, there seemed to be some influential authors. Looking at like Irenaeus seems to be either, if he didn't create it, he was at the forefront of making the belief popular that like the devil is the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Origen is really seen as instrumental in helping Christianity adopt the idea that the devil's a fallen angel. At least of what we have records of today, Origen seems to be the first person that associates the fall of the devil with what Isaiah says.
Okay.
When he says, like, Lucifer, how art thou fallen?
Yeah.
Those types of thinkers at that time seem to be putting ideas out there that we could look back and say, okay, those became really popular.
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell whether they were responsible for it or they were just early in on the trend.
Mm.
But what we kind of get this idea is by the time you hit the 3rd or 4th century, you have this term devil, that there is a vague understanding. Like we know that the devil is an enemy of God.
Yeah.
The devil is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The devil was an angel who fell.
Mm.
But beyond that, there's a lot of what the devil is beyond those things, especially in the details. There's a lot of
Right.
disagreement.
Okay. When we look at the evolution or the development of the devil, you've started to lay out some of the foundations for how we got to understand, or at least the early beginnings of beliefs. When you fast forward just a little bit, not talking so much to the present day, but somewhere in that mid ground, how much of culture began to shape the form or function?
So, what I would say is that in my research, one of the things that I was trying to do, and I think I did successfully, was figure out, in terms of the function, what is the devil doing if we have all these different ideas?
Yeah.
And what I boiled it down to, like, the very simplest way that I could, and then subsequently endeavored to prove, is that really what the devil is doing is, in terms of function, mind you,
Yeah.
is that he seems to be, and I say he, depending on who you're writing, the gender of the devil can be different, but
Right.
most commonly referred to as he, seems to be functioning as a way for people to identify and condemn things in their communities or in their lives that they don't like, but they can't necessarily justify as harmful.
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
A great example is, well, you want like a modern or an ancient one?
Either.
Okay, so like a modern example of this, which you see all the time in politics, right? Especially in a lot of more nationalistic type Christianity, is you pick out a group of people and you say that they're inspired by the devil. So you might say, trans people are wrong. Well, I can't actually see any harm that the trans community is doing. So I may not be able to justify that, but what I can say is you're against God and you're inspired of the devil. And once I attach the devil to it, that's all I need to justify not liking it. I use the example of being trans, obviously, because I'm trans myself, and that's one I hear quite frequently.
Yeah.
But it's once you attach the symbol of the devil to it,
Yeah.
you don't need a justification to hate it anymore. And so one of the things that you would see in early Christianity that was frequently attached to the devil by a guy named John Chrysostom is the theater. The theater was considered more scandalous back then, and part of the reason was because actors were seen as liars.
Yeah.
They were pretending to be something they're not. In fact, the word hypocrite is actually the Greek word for actor. You're pretending to do something that you're not really doing.
I didn't know that at all. Wow.
And so a lot of people didn't like the theater, but the problem is the theater was both popular and harmless. And so what John Chrysostom decided to do was say that the theater is actually the creation of the devil. And now we've attached the harm to it, because even though we can't see what the harm is, the fact that it's attached to the devil means it's bad and we should hate it.
Yeah.
So how the devil begins to function in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, and I would argue up until today, is that it gives us justification to hate things we would otherwise not be able to justify hating.
Yeah. I've heard a lot when we were going through seminary conversations about assigning evil or a title of aligned with the devil, was all the justification that was needed to then other a person, but to go even beyond othering, to remove that person's humanity, because now they're in league with this evil superpower, and we know if there's a person, I have a relationship with a person, but man, that evil I can separate myself from.
So I think there's definitely an otherizing that's associated. I think that's a step to it. I think it goes beyond that, though. I think that it's almost like an otherizing that I actually can't think of a good reason to otherize other than it makes me uncomfortable. And so instead of going up and saying, oh, I hate that person, and somebody says why, and I say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can say, oh, I hate that person. Why? Because they're inspired of the devil.
Yeah.
And so when I do that, I'm not only otherizing this other person, but I'm seeking to absolve myself of a responsibility for doing so. It's not my fault. I'm protecting goodness by fighting the devil.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything wrong here.
Yeah.
It's this other person who's now associated with the devil.
Yeah. I mean, that just feels like that rings true in politics today, and especially with the rise of Christian nationalism. And do we have reason to hate these groups of people, whether it be the trans community, immigrants, someone who thinks different than us?
Well, I think, and you mentioned it just a second ago, I think the other danger in doing it is we stop seeing people as fully human.
Yeah.
Right? If we can say that this person is doing the work of the devil, we get to say that they're the enemy. And therefore, whatever misfortune or bad thing happens to them,
Yeah.
not only is it justified in our minds, but it's okay if we feel happy about it.
Yeah.
And really, that is really sad. Even when we disagree, and believe me, there's a lot of things I disagree with very powerfully right now. There is a danger that happens when you stop seeing your opponent as human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that what the function of the devil has become is an excuse to stop seeing people as human.
Yeah. Well, I know this is maybe leaning more into theoretical and may not necessarily be the function or study of your work, but when we talk about devil, I'm not asking you to take a point on whether you believe in a devil or not, but the popular opinion seems to lean towards there is this great devil, quote unquote, out in the world. I mean, would I be correct in saying it's more of there is a great evil in the world, and yet we, by assigning this title to it, are assigning a certain level of power? Or am I hitting in the right area?
Yes and no. So I would say probably the single most common question I get asked is the devil real? And I feel like that you didn't quite ask that, but we're dancing around that.
Yeah.
And I've always struggled with that question a little bit because I think it's the wrong question, at least from a practicality standpoint.
Yeah.
I know if we want to get into like metaphysics and things like that, there's some value to trying to understand whether the devil exists or not. But when I was writing my dissertation, I came across a sermon written by John Chrysostom, who is the guy who hated the theater and all that.
Right.
And he was having a specific problem with one of his congregations. He was the bishop of Antioch at the time. And his problem was this idea that the devil made me do it.
Yeah.
Like this idea that, oh, I did something bad or I'm not doing something well, but is it really my fault if the devil is the one pushing me to do it? And he was so sick of his congregation falling on that excuse. And so he gives this big sermon about it. And, I would say like the amount of Chrysostom's theology that I personally believe is very, very small. But in this particular sermon, he made a really excellent point, and I'm a big advocate of accepting truth where you find it.
Yeah.
But he kind of said it doesn't matter, because if you look from a theological perspective, he's like, let's say that the devil is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah.
What happened? Well, you have the devil tempts Eve. Eve eats of the fruit. Eve pressures Adam. Adam eats of the fruit, if we're taking a Genesis account, very superficially. And then Chrysostom says, and what happens? God comes down, and then what? Well, he said, Eve, did you take of the fruit? And Eve's response is very telling here for Chrysostom, because she says, well, the serpent tricked me. The devil motivated me to do this. And God goes, okay, well, you're going to be punished. And this is where the lesson comes in for Chrysostom is it doesn't matter if we do something wrong. It doesn't matter if it comes from us or the devil. We are accountable.
Yeah.
And so when we ask the question about does the devil exist or not, the reason I feel like it's the wrong question is because whether the devil exists or the devil doesn't exist, I am still accountable.
Yeah.
If I do something wrong, whether it comes from me or whether it comes from some outside source, the decision is mine.
Yeah.
And God is going to hold me to that.
Yeah.
And so when I look about, is there this evil force that's out there working against me or something like that, I don't spend a lot of energy trying to figure that out. Well, instead, I put my energy with whether this force exists or not.
Right.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing where I'm going to be accountable for it?
Yeah.
And so, like, my honest answer to your question would be I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I would also caution against getting bogged down with that idea.
Yeah.
And instead make sure that you're focusing on, am I recognizing that I'm accountable, and how is that affecting what I choose to do?
Yeah. I love the fact that your answer went to the place that I think I've wrestled most with is in that devil made me do it response. Feels like it's us trying to deny our agency within something, and oftentimes in actually committing to the work or trying to deny responsibility in being involved in helping make better communities, building better relationships with people, taking care of self, the things that are actually like hitting it, what it means to be a person.
The ironic thing is I think there's an impulse to, when we say, oh, the devil made me do it, or the devil tricked me, or whatever, is we're trying to find an excuse for why we didn't do something right.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, God is like, you don't need that excuse. That's the whole point of Jesus coming to be sacrificed and all that stuff, is you're gonna not do it right every time.
Right.
You don't need to make an excuse for what you didn't do right. You need to just change the behavior and move forward.
Yeah.
And obviously try to repair as best you can if your behavior caused damage.
Right.
That's the whole point of the atonement. And so, like, the devil as a justification for why, or an excuse for why we screw up, isn't actually needed.
Yeah.
And yet I think it's something that people do to try to comfort themselves.
Yeah.
For having to need to rely on the atonement to make things right.
Yeah. Well, and in doing so, I think we rob, not God, but I think we rob ourselves the power of accepting what is present in that gift of freedom, liberation, reconciliation, because we're not relying solely on this free gift that has come for us to be open to receiving. It's trying to then still hold some measure of power or agency within it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it as a Christian, there's no need to make an excuse. The assumption is at some point, probably pretty regularly, you're gonna mess up.
Yeah.
And that's what part of the journey is, getting better over time while relying on the tools and the gifts that God has provided for that purpose. And you know what? The devil wasn't one of those. The devil isn't needed in that regard. In fact, the devil, using the devil as a way to excuse when we fall short, can actually hinder the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of a wrap-up question here, that segues perfectly into why is it important then for us to study the devil, to think about these kinds of questions, to wrestle with it?
I would say, and once again, I'm biased here, but I think it's important to look at how the devil is functioning in your life. And what I mean by that is, whether the devil exists or whether the devil doesn't exist, is how is it affecting me?
Yeah.
And in turn, is it affecting other people through me?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, am I using the devil to try to target people that make me uncomfortable?
Yeah.
If I am, why?
Yeah.
And maybe that should cause me to do some self-reflection and figure out, okay, is this person or group doing something wrong? And if they're not, then I can say, okay, so it has nothing to do with the devil. I'm just needing to grow here.
Yeah.
Or I can say, if they are, it has nothing to do with the devil, but this is the specific thing that's going on here that I find either unsettling or dangerous or harmful. And what can I do to counteract that?
Yeah.
But I think if we're not aware of how the devil is functioning, there is a very strong tendency to use the devil as an excuse to do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of our jumping into the series in the first place came from conversations and questions that I had where they would outright ask, is the devil real? And part of it, I think I leaned to what you've said, but an understanding of it's important for us to know why we're saying what we're saying or why we do what we do as people of faith. And when so many people that I've seen use the devil as the excuse or the escapist kind of model, it becomes the thing that you can, as long as you mention the name, anything you associate with it, now I have freedom to hate, now I have freedom to excuse myself from action or participation in community. And as we're trying to build a faith community here, does that help us as a community, or is it hindering us? And how do we then come to an understanding of it's still important for us to study, but in a way that also releases us from running from something or using this escape route out and lets us run headlong into what we're running towards?
Yeah, I would say that the usefulness of the devil as a function in a healthy way is limited, but it does exist. For me, it's really easy to for two ways. If the only thing I can say about something that makes me uncomfortable is, oh, it's of the devil, that is now an indicator to me that I really need to think about that belief and that discomfort.
Yeah.
Because if I don't actually have a reason, then that's me actually trying to run from dealing with it.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, and this is probably the one that happens much more often, especially in terms of social justice and things like that. If you see a person or group that is being vilified simply because of, oh, this must be inspired by the devil and nothing else,
Right.
then that's also an indication to me of, I probably need to call that out. I need to push back on that.
Yeah.
And so it can be a way to help identify people that are being targeted for not doing any harm, but just because people are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't find the devil particularly useful.
Yeah.
And I think that by getting bogged down in those details, what I would end up doing is playing the game of the people who are trying to dehumanize using the devil, or to feel not guilty about dehumanizing, and that's just not a game where anybody really wins.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think with this conversation, clearly I've also done some study in this, not near as much as you, but a recognition that the harmful practices that have been tied up in this aren't something new to society. but they also have given us directions, benchmarks, ways of knowing and understanding where the power or authority is being skewed to support any form of hatred or being against, and gives us the freedom to be people who can be liberated from that, and start taking responsibility and agency for our own participation in these practices that dehumanize or harm people.
Yeah.
And now we get to run headlong into saying, I need to align with the work that needs to break this down.
Yeah. I think that any group or any person who is being oppressed for the only reason that people can come up with is it is inspired of the devil and no other harm is coming, that is usually a good indication of somebody that needs my help.
Yeah.
A group or a person or whatever.
Yeah.
And really using the devil to try to get a justification for mistreating somebody is cowardly.
Yeah.
It's about people who are finding any way they can to not confront their own discomfort.
Yeah.
And so I think it's possible to use knowledge of the devil, but use it in a way that helps you identify the people that need help, and not as a way for you to appease your own sense of guilt for hating people without a cause.
Yeah. And just speaking from the spiritual formation, pastoral place, why take this on in the first place? The language has been used so much around the devil to say what we're opposed to. By liberating ourselves, or at least having a better understanding of this language from the historical, contextual place, we as people of faith now have the freedom, or at least the obligation, to say that it's not about what we're running from, but allowing ourselves to be liberated so that we're running towards where there really is value and power, and I would name that as God, and running towards this great love. But we're only able to do so when we're able to understand more fully, not just saying devil made me do it, or using those other justifications, but being able to shed that off and have a better understanding of, as a tool, as an understanding the metaphor or the language, now I'm able to engage in the work that I'm called to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think to very, very simply, and probably not thoroughly enough, sum up what you just said is the devil is overhyped.
Yeah.
And it can be useful in terms of figuring out what we need to run towards, but if we focus on it too much, it's usually because we're misusing that function.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's helpful to know about, but it's not helpful to be consumed with.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Love it. As we wrap up, any final thoughts, or that feels like we ran a marathon there.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
I think that the devil is really it's kind of like a scandalous type of topic, but if you boil down and ask yourself what is actually the function of the devil in my life, it can be enlightening, but I think it can also help you realize where not to put a lot of focus.
Right.
And so just kind of to sum up, people love to talk about the devil. I wherever I go and people find out what
Yeah.
my research has been. They always want to talk about it, but I think the thing my research has really highlighted the most is that we're accountable.
Yeah.
Whether the devil plays a role or not, at the end of the day, it's our individual choices that
Right.
determine who we are.
Yeah.
And whether it's coming from us or from outside sources. And if you look at it from that point of view, the devil should be a lot less significant in your life.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's up to you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for, first of all, making the long trip from San Francisco, not just for this, but to be here and have this conversation. And I mean, as long as I've known you, this has been a fascinating part of a story that I've always wanted to explore deeper with you. But I think our community will really benefit from this conversation. So
Okay.
thanks for being here.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah, love you, Chelsea.
Love you too.